Okay.
All right. I really appreciate you doing this. I know you've got a lot to do. So,
Yeah, no problem.
hey, Mayor, what do you remember most about that night when the tornado hit a year ago?
Well, two things kind of stick out for me. One was the fact that my family and I didn't get to our basement in a timely fashion, and one of the tornadoes hit about 200 yards from my house, and we probably didn't take it seriously enough. And so, for whatever reason, that sticks out in my mind. That we just saw it was blowing hard. It's windy. Just a typical South Dakota windy evening, and how myself personally underestimated the power of that storm. But the second thing I remember is about half hour after it hit and things were kind of calm again, just saying, I gotta get in my car, I gotta go, and going down to Fire Station 3, and just the apocalyptic feeling of driving down Minnesota from where I live down to the 37th in Minnesota, and just the trees down and no lights, there's no electricity. It just felt like apocalyptic's the only way to describe it. It was just weird. You're dodging, you're going into other lanes to avoid trees all strewn all over the road, and just thinking, man, we are in for a long journey ahead of us to recover from this, not knowing what we were going to face once the sun came up.
So when you walked into the incident command post, what was the first thing you were told? What's the first thing you remember from the fire and police and so forth?
Yeah, what's really interesting and encouraging about how this works is the minute I walked into Fire Station 3, they already had a real temporary EOC set up on the TVs. Mark Bukovic is there with fire, and he was already kind of showing me the call log that we were seeing through Zerker, through our software, of all the calls, 911 calls that were coming in, and starting to see the prioritization of those. And it was power outages, it was trees on houses, it was buildings gone. And I remember seeing that list of priority calls and just thinking, wow, this thing is just starting. I mean, we literally are less than an hour from these tornadoes hitting the ground, and I'm just watching these calls just roll in and roll in. And knowing that there hadn't been any reports of death yet, that Mark had known about, and that was what I kept asking is, do we know if anyone's passed away? Do we know if there's anybody missing? And it just kept saying, it's too early to know. It's too early to know that. And that's kind of what was real heavy on my mind is, we had a lot of property damage calls that were coming in, but I was waiting to hear, okay, are we going to have the tragic call that we'd have to deal with? And, fortunately, that never happened. And that's the one thing I kind of reflect on is when you saw the damage from some of those, the fact that we didn't have any even real serious injuries. I mean, I remember hearing about a broken leg, someone and some other things, but man, we really dodged what could have been a much bigger disaster that night with in terms of lives and tragic injuries.
You remember what the first order, maybe that's not the right word, or recommendation that you made while you were there? And I know you have professional managers, for emergency services that do this thing, but what was the first thing that you said, we have to do X?
Well, the first thing I said we had to do is we got to, one, get our more permanent EOC stood up at the law enforcement center ASAP, because I knew this was going to be a multi-day and potential multi-week operation just based on what I had seen coming in. And when I saw those calls coming in, the first thing I said to Mark is let's get going on getting the EOC stood up at the LEC, because my phone was starting to blow up with texts, and I knew we needed to centralize the command. So that was one of the first things that we got on right away.
So the sirens didn't work that night for some parts of the city. How did you find out about that? And you took responsibility immediately at, I don't know if it was the first or second news conference you had that morning, and said, look, human error. So what was the lesson there that you think you and the city learned with that?
Well, I found out because I started getting some texts, 2, 3 in the morning from people in my administration saying, hey, we don't think the alarm sounded in certain parts of the city. So that was one of the first things I started diving into to try and understand, okay, how did that happen And it's really kind of an interesting story about how that happened, where the way that sirens sound, and you probably know this, but a lot of people don't, is, the National Weather Service, they identify the tornado on the ground, then they contact our dispatch center, Metro Communications, and tell them to sound the sirens. So they did that. In that exchange, panic, there's 3 tornadoes on the ground. Weather Services, sound the sirens. Dispatch says, okay, where's it at? Where at? They said, southwest part of the city. Okay, got it, hang up. What National Weather Service was saying is, there's a tornado on the ground in the southwest part of the city. What dispatch heard was, sound the alarms in the southwest part of the city. That's where the community, it was no one's fault. It was the tenseness of the situation. We actually aren't even trained to sound alarms in only certain parts of the city. There's a big red button you push and they all go off. So dispatch had to go into the back end and figure out how to only sound certain sirens. So it's not even something we're trained to do. And so that was really what happened. That's why sirens didn't sound across the city. So when we found out that that's what went down, it's like, all right, the good news is this is just human error training protocol, and we can put in software, catches in place to assure that that option is not available. The only thing you can do is sound the sirens in the entirety of the city. So we put a software patch in place to correct that. And I just knew that was the first press conference. It was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. We had our first presser after the tornadoes had hit. I knew that was going to get brought up. And I'm like, well, I have 2 choices. I either say, well, they did sound in some parts of the city, and you shouldn't rely on outdoor sirens. You should have a weather radio. And it's like, listen, I'm the chair of Metro Management. Metro Management's in charge of sounding the sirens. Didn't happen. It's my watch. We'll figure it out. We'll fix it. I'm going to take the blame for it because we screwed up, and we did. And luckily, to my first point, there were no loss of lives or catastrophic injuries. If we had lost lives or had catastrophic injuries, I think that issue would have been amplified even more, because then you'd have to determine, okay, was that a result of, the siren issue or not? Luckily, it wasn't. We fixed it. We check it and test that every month. And that's something that's worked into our testing now every month. So that was a learning moment for me. It was a learning moment for our teams, because, we don't get sirens, or we don't get tornadoes every year. So it was a really critical moment for Metro, for police, for fire, for myself.
Yeah, I can tell you firsthand from some of my experiences with Civil Air Patrol and other things, the fog of emergencies, the fog of war. I mean, you don't necessarily hear what you should hear. You're thinking 2 steps ahead, and
right.
So yeah, it's pretty understandable that something like that might happen. So it's a lesson learned, I'm sure, for you and the city, and maybe for all of us, that we have to communicate clearly with each other, even in a terrible situation like that. One of the things that you did in the aftermath that was interesting was, you sent city crews out to help, people dig out if they needed to, but you basically said, we're going to help the homeowners and the businesses dig out. And some people weren't real thrilled about it, but it seems like it worked out okay. What was your thinking about that? And are you pleased with the results, and would you do that again?
So to clarify your question, are you asking, you said we help the homeowners and businesses dig out, or are you saying that I called on people to help those people do that work?
Yes, there were some city crews out, if I recollect correctly. But it was primarily the city was not taking the primary role. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But
no, you're correct. You're correct. Yeah. So part of the rationale there was, these tornadoes hit in September. And September and even into October is really the kind of Super Bowl of construction season in South Dakota. And so we rely on something like this. We rely on contractors to do a lot of this sort of work for the city. Well, contractors, if they're staring at a project to finish this chunk of highway, and all their heavy equipment and stuff is available on that project, and they got a deadline they have to hit, or they face financial penalties, for me to say, hey, would you put that job on hold for 5 days and come help us clean up? They said it's not possible. So crews were in short supply, which a lot of people maybe didn't realize. So I had to really dip into the goodwill of the community and try and say, hey, we need you to help your residents, your citizens, your neighbors right now. And I never wanted to say because crews are in short supply. It was more of a because it's the right thing to do. And after something like that hits a city, and there's a lot of guilt that people have if they weren't really impacted. So it's like, God, my house was unscathed, and my garbage can tipped over. That's about it. And then you go 2 blocks away, and someone's house is totally just destroyed, and you feel this guilt, almost like, why me? Why did I not get hit with this? And what can I do to help? Well, I knew I was feeling that way. I knew a lot of other people were too. So to be able to say, listen, here's how you can help. Get a truck, get a chainsaw, put some gloves on, start cleaning up. Every branch in the city you see, it's got to get picked up. And we got spots where you can bring them to. And that just seemed to really energize the community.
I guess I noticed Saturday, my wife and I took a couple of our grandkids on a walk. My daughter lives in the neighborhood a few blocks west of Augustana, kind of between Augustana and Western. And they had a lot of straight line winds and a lot of trees. And by Saturday, it was pretty amazing. I mean, there were people, like you said, with pickup trucks and helping people in their yards get rid of stuff, getting the trees out of there and whatever else was there. So it was an interesting thing to kind of see from the outside looking in. And so, would you do it again that way if we have, God forbid, another terrible storm like that?
Well, part of it is, and when I started in the mayor's office, we started this kind of creative motto in the city, which one Sioux Falls. And I talk about that all the time. And I talk about how being a resident in Sioux Falls or being a business owner in Sioux Falls comes with a responsibility to your community that we have to work together. And you build up that brand and that culture, not knowing when you have to dip into that bank account to take a withdrawal. And so we built up this one Sioux Falls, we're one Sioux Falls, we're one community. And that was the first time to say, okay, now it's time to act like it. We've talked about it. Now this is your chance to put that into action. And so that became a rallying cry for the cleanup, the hashtags, people talking about it. It was almost like the work that we put into the community to build that culture of unity paid off then when we needed it to. Would I do it again? Probably. And I say that because the way that the community united around the cleanup, they all felt engaged in their city. It got done way quicker than if people had just sat on their porches and waited for the city to come by. It would have taken forever. And in a lot of ways, it unified our city even more than it already was. I mean, people were connecting with other people in the community they would never have met before. They would have never had served before. And it made them feel, I think, more invested in their neighborhoods and in their city.
With the various things you've had to deal with, I think, I don't know, at least more than any other mayor in my lifetime, maybe in the history of Sioux Falls, you've dealt with floods, you've dealt with tornadoes, you've dealt with the coronavirus. I'm probably forgetting a couple things in there of things that you probably didn't think you might have to do when you ran for the office. How does that make you feel? I mean, you have had to handle some extraordinary events that most of your former colleagues have never had to face. Do you ever think about that?
I do, and it makes me sometimes question, why I got put in this chair at this time. And my faith is very important to me, and I just wonder why I got put in this role right now. And because I will agree with you that while it's only been 2.5 years, it's been 8 years worth of stuff and worth of challenges. In a lot of ways, it's been hard to get some proactive momentum going on some things because we've been in sustained crisis mode. Even the last 6 months with coronavirus, you're just dealing with this slow burn crisis every day, just issues around that, which kind of puts a damper on the community and this cloud over the community that I wish wasn't there, but it's there. We have to deal with it. We have to accept it. And I have a little quote in my signature file. It says, leaders are forged in crisis. So it's easy to lead when things are good. It's very hard when things are challenging. And so I always equate it like this. I said, you go into Barnes and Noble or you go on Amazon, you go to the leadership section, and there are thousands and thousands of books that people are writing on leadership and leadership style and all this. This is a Super Bowl moment to actually put those things into action, that a lot of people would love to have that opportunity. So I try and look at these challenges as, man, what an opportunity that I've been given to help lead the city through this time. I mean, a lot of people would maybe love to do this, and I got to look at it as, wow, what a gift I've been given. Because you have to look at it that way, because if you look at it as, man, this really sucks, and this has been really hard, that will just eat you up and will grind you down. So you have to look at it as, wow, what a blessing I've been given that I get to lead through this stuff. Oh, this will be great. So you have to take that attitude.
Maybe your emergency manager, Reagan Smith, can put you in for a waiver with FEMA to become an incident commander.
Oh, that guy, I've seen him way more than I've wanted to too this past couple of years. I was in a meeting with him the other day, and I said, man, I haven't seen you in a while, and I love it. I love it. So.
Yeah, it's something when the fire bell goes off and you jump on the truck. It is kind of exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I tell you, you don't really know how great of a city team you have, a director team, leadership team, until something like this happens and you see the Regan Smiths shine, and the Matt Burns shine, and the Mark Bukovic's shine, and the Jill Franken shine in public health, and Andy Berg in engineering with the flooding. And you see some of these people really step up in a big way. And it reinforces to me each time it happens, man, we got a great city leadership team here. And it's easy for me to say that, but the taxpayers should know that there's some really smart people who have chosen to be in public service because they love this city. They could be doing a lot of other things, but they love this city, and people can feel calm and comforted in the fact that when something goes down, there's some good people calling shots behind the scenes.
Oh, I forgot to mention the riot. How could we forget about that? So you've got a riot you've had to deal with too. I mean, it's like the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Right.
But it seems all said and done, the city's doing well. I mean, economically, even with the coronavirus. I know both of my kids got laid off. One's working again now, back at their former employer, and my daughter's still looking. And I know there's still some people hurting out there, but we're pretty fortunate in Sioux Falls, all things considered, with everything that's happened in this past, like I said, 2.5 years. Mayor, before I let you go, is there anything else you wanted to mention about the tornado and the response and so forth? I know you want to get back to your kids. Oh, by the way, we love the Paul and Nora show on Facebook. And a lot of our broadcasts with that.
Nora would do that every dang night if I let her, man. She absolutely loves it. But I will say, we
love to scoop that you're colorblind. I'm sure that was a happy moment.
Yeah, she was so excited to tell people that I'm colorblind. So I'm like, all right. I will say this, just in closing, all that stuff you listed and all those hardships, where we sit today, September 9, 2020, is we have economy that's seeing positive sales tax growth. We have hospitalizations from COVID that are way below than we ever projected. I mean, the numbers today where I saw about 30 in our MSA, and we just kind of hang around there. So there are cities and states all over the country that would love to be in a situation where the economy is ticking up, hospitalizations are low. I mean, we have struck this balance so well, I think, in this state. And specifically, I think in Sioux Falls, we've done a really good job with that. And so it takes a lot to bring this city down, man. I mean, all that's been thrown at it in the last 2 years, we just keep on trucking. Economy keeps on humming, the community keeps uniting, businesses keep growing. And we are a resilient town. If I had to use one word over the last 2.5 years to describe Sioux Falls, we are just resilient. There's not a lot that can, catch us off guard.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I know you're really busy, and I'm kind of biting into your family time.
No problem, man.
Now, thanks for all you've done for the city, and I hope your next 1.5 years is a little calmer than the last 2.5.
Whew. I'm getting your hairstyle, man. It's going. So.
Well, you look good, man.
Yeah, thanks, Todd.
All right. Thanks a lot,
All right.
Paul. Bye.
Yeah, see ya. Bye.